My beloved child. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than words. Moments when two hearts become separated not because love disappeared, but because fear, pride, misunderstandings, and wounds built invisible walls between them. Tonight, I invite you into one of those moments, a story that may awaken hope inside your heart and remind you that love is often more complicated than it first appears. Somewhere, in a place far from where you are sitting now, someone is staring into the quiet darkness, unable to escape the memories that follow them wherever they go. They replay conversations they wish they could erase. They remember the words spoken in anger, the doors closed too quickly, the opportunities they allowed to slip away because they believed there would always be another tomorrow. But tomorrow arrived, and you were no longer there. At first, they convinced themselves they had made the right decision. They buried their emotions beneath busy days, endless distractions, and forced smiles. They told themselves they were moving on. They laughed with people who never truly knew them. They filled empty spaces with noise because silence was too dangerous. Yet every night, when the world became still, one thought quietly returned. You. Not because they were lonely. Not because they had no one else. But because some connections leave fingerprints on the soul that time refuses to erase. The smallest things began reminding them of you. A familiar song playing unexpectedly. A place they once visited with you. A certain fragrance carried by the evening breeze. Even random strangers would unknowingly remind them of your smile, your kindness, your patience, or the way you looked at them when no one else was watching. Each memory became another unanswered question. What if I had stayed? What if I had listened instead of reacting? What if I had fought for us instead of against us? Those questions slowly transformed into something heavier than regret. They became truth. For the first time, this person stopped blaming circumstances. They stopped blaming timing. They stopped blaming everyone around them. Instead, they looked honestly into their own heart. And what they found humbled them. They realized that love had never truly been the problem. Fear had been. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of rejection. Fear of losing control. Fear of believing someone could genuinely love them despite their flaws. So they built walls before anyone else could. Unfortunately, those walls also shut you out. Now, every brick they once placed to protect themselves has become a prison they desperately want to escape. They remember the conversations they ended too quickly. The messages they never answered. The apologies they never offered. The affection they assumed you would always understand without hearing it spoken aloud. Only now do they realize that unspoken love often feels exactly like absence. And absence creates wounds that neither person ever intended. My beloved child. Imagine someone sitting quietly, holding memories they can no longer outrun. Imagine their heart whispering words they never had the courage to say when they mattered most. If only I could go back. If only I had one more chance. If only they knew how deeply I regret everything. Those words grow louder with every passing day. Because genuine regret is different from guilt. Guilt fears consequences. Regret mourns lost opportunities. And sometimes, regret becomes the beginning of transformation. Transformation is never comfortable. It forces people to confront the versions of themselves they spent years defending. It asks difficult questions. Why did I push away the person who loved me? Why was I afraid of happiness? Why did I confuse pride with strength? Every honest answer breaks another chain around the heart. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, this person begins changing. Not because someone demanded it. Not because anyone pressured them. But because they no longer recognize the person they became. They don't want to repeat the same mistakes. They don't want another relationship built on misunderstanding. They don't want another goodbye that could have been prevented by humility. Most of all, they don't want to spend another year wondering what life would have looked like if they had simply chosen love over fear. So they begin preparing themselves. Not with grand speeches. Not with dramatic promises. But with quiet growth. Learning patience. Learning honesty. Learning accountability. Learning that love is proven through consistent actions far more than beautiful words. Eventually, one thought becomes impossible to ignore. I need to make things right. Not because they expect forgiveness. Not because they believe everything will magically return to the way it once was. But because some apologies deserve to be spoken, even when there is no guarantee they will be accepted. Deep inside, they rehearse the conversation countless times. I regret everything I said. I regret the pain I caused. I regret believing my pride was more important than our future. I wish I had understood your heart before I broke it. Those words never leave their mind. Each sunrise strengthens their determination. Each sunset reminds them that life is too short to leave important things unsaid. They realize something many people discover only after losing someone precious. Love is not found in perfection. Love survives because two imperfect people choose understanding instead of ego. And perhaps, the greatest miracle is not finding someone extraordinary. The greatest miracle is becoming the person your heart should have been all along. As that realization settles within them, fear slowly loses its power. Hope quietly takes its place. Not blind hope. Not fantasy. But courageous hope. The kind that says, I cannot change yesterday. But I can choose who I become tomorrow. And somewhere inside that choice, a decision begins forming. A decision that could change everything. Because after carrying this regret for so long, after replaying every memory, after finally understanding what was truly lost, this person reaches a quiet conclusion. They can no longer stay away. What they decide to do next may become the beginning of a completely new chapter. But before that chapter begins, there is one final truth they must first confront. A truth powerful enough to determine whether love can truly find its way home once again. My beloved child. The heart has an unusual way of revealing truths that the mind spends years trying to hide. There comes a moment when excuses lose their power, when every carefully constructed reason for walking away collapses beneath the weight of one simple realization: love was never the enemy. Pride was. Fear was. Silence was. And now, those three companions that once seemed to offer protection have become constant reminders of what was lost. The person whose heart carries your memory has reached that crossroads. They no longer wake each morning believing that time alone will erase what happened. Instead, every new day has become another opportunity to examine the choices that led them here. They no longer ask, "Why did this happen to me?" They ask, "What could I have done differently?" That question changes everything. It is the question that transforms regret into growth. For the first time, they begin noticing the little moments they once overlooked. They remember how you celebrated their victories even when no one else noticed. They remember the way you listened without rushing to judge. They remember your patience on days when they were difficult to understand. At the time, those gestures seemed ordinary. Today, they realize they were extraordinary gifts wrapped in everyday moments. Isn't it remarkable how the heart often recognizes true treasure only after distance has made it impossible to touch? That realization has humbled them in ways they never expected. There was a season when they believed strength meant never admitting mistakes. They thought apologizing made a person weak. They believed protecting their pride was more important than protecting the relationship. But life has a quiet way of teaching lessons that no one can avoid forever. Every lonely evening became another classroom. Every memory became another teacher. Every unanswered question became another reminder that the strongest people are not those who never fall, they are the ones brave enough to rise, admit where they stumbled, and walk back toward what truly matters. So they stopped running. They stopped pretending they were completely fine. They stopped telling themselves that replacing one relationship with another would heal what was broken inside. Instead, they chose something far more difficult. They chose honesty. That honesty led them to places within their own heart they had never explored before. They discovered insecurities they had hidden for years. They recognized fears that had quietly influenced every decision they made. They admitted that many of the arguments were never really about the words spoken, they were about wounds they carried long before they ever met you. Understanding this didn't erase the pain. But it gave the pain meaning. It transformed blame into responsibility. And responsibility became the first step toward becoming someone capable of loving more deeply than ever before. As the days passed, they noticed another change. Your memory no longer filled them with despair alone. It began filling them with gratitude. Gratitude for the laughter you shared. Gratitude for the dreams you once spoke about together. Gratitude that, even if the journey became painful, they had experienced a connection that challenged them to become a better person. That gratitude awakened courage. One evening, while sitting alone with nothing but silence surrounding them, they whispered words they had never spoken aloud before. I was wrong. No audience applauded. No one answered. But those three words echoed through their heart like the first rays of sunrise after a long, storm-filled night. From that moment forward, something changed. They no longer imagined winning an argument. They imagined rebuilding trust. They no longer dreamed about proving themselves right. They dreamed about becoming worthy of another conversation. Every small decision began reflecting that desire. They became more patient with others. More compassionate. More willing to listen. More willing to admit when they didn't have every answer. Without realizing it, they were becoming the person they should have been from the very beginning. Yet despite all this growth, one fear remained. What if it's too late? That question lingered in every quiet moment. What if the bridge had already collapsed? What if too much time had passed? What if the heart they once held so carelessly had finally learned to live without them? Those thoughts frightened them more than they could explain. Even so, another voice continued speaking gently within them. You'll never know unless you try. And that simple truth refused to disappear. It followed them through ordinary mornings and restless nights. It reminded them that courage is not the absence of fear, it is choosing to move forward despite fear. So they began preparing for the moment they had imagined countless times. Not with perfect speeches. Not with unrealistic expectations. Only with sincerity. Only with humility. Only with a heart finally willing to say everything it had kept hidden for far too long. Because some words deserve to be spoken while there is still time. Some apologies deserve to be offered without demanding anything in return. Some promises deserve to be made only after genuine change has already begun. The promise forming within their heart was simple. I cannot erase yesterday. But I can spend every tomorrow becoming someone who honors the love I once took for granted. Those words became their quiet commitment. A commitment not built on emotion alone, but on daily choices. And with every passing sunrise, one decision became clearer than ever before. They could no longer allow fear to write the ending of this story. They would return. Not as the same person who walked away, but as someone transformed by reflection, humility, and hope. Still, there remained one final obstacle. One conversation. One moment where every lesson they had learned would finally be tested. Because returning is only the beginning. The true question is what happens when two hearts, both changed by time, finally stand face to face again. My beloved child. The night before that long-awaited moment felt different from every night that had come before it. Sleep refused to stay with them, not because their mind was filled with fear alone, but because hope had quietly returned after being absent for so long. They stared into the darkness, imagining every possible outcome. They knew they could not control your response. They could not rewrite the past or erase the tears that had already been shed. But they could finally do something they had avoided for far too long. They could tell the truth. Not the polished version. Not the version that protected their pride. The complete truth. For hours they replayed your last conversations together. They remembered the moments when you were asking to be understood while they were too busy trying to be right. They remembered opportunities to listen that they had wasted by speaking over your heart instead of hearing it. Those memories no longer filled them with defensiveness. They filled them with humility. It is a strange thing, isn't it? Sometimes wisdom arrives only after the storm has already passed. Sometimes the lessons we needed most are written inside the chapters we wish had never happened. Yet those chapters were not meaningless. Every mistake became a mirror. Every disappointment became an invitation to grow. Every lonely season became preparation for a future they once believed was impossible. As dawn slowly approached, they made one final promise to themselves. If I am given another chance, I will not waste it. That promise was not spoken lightly. It was built upon countless nights of reflection, countless silent prayers, and countless moments of realizing that love cannot survive where honesty is absent. When the morning finally arrived, everything felt unusually still. The ordinary sounds of the day seemed quieter. The air itself carried a sense of anticipation. They took a deep breath, not because they were certain of success, but because they had finally become certain of who they wanted to be. For the first time in a long time, fear was no longer making their decisions. Love was. They began the journey with no elaborate expectations. They were not returning to demand forgiveness. They were not returning to erase consequences. They were returning because your heart deserved answers that had never been given. It deserved honesty that had been delayed. It deserved respect that should never have been withheld. Step by step, they moved closer. Every mile reminded them that healing is rarely dramatic. More often, it is a series of quiet choices repeated every single day. Choose patience. Choose kindness. Choose humility. Choose truth. Those simple decisions had slowly transformed them into someone they barely recognized. And for the first time, they were grateful for that transformation. Because had everything gone according to their original plans, they might never have discovered the person they were capable of becoming. Pain had changed them. Not into someone bitter. Into someone wiser. As they continued forward, they imagined what they would say if given only a few moments to speak. They would not begin with excuses. They would not blame circumstances. Instead, they would simply say, "I understand now. I understand the tears I ignored. I understand the silence I created. I understand the weight you carried while I looked the other way. And I am deeply sorry." Those words had waited a long time to be spoken. Each one carried the weight of genuine change. Not because they sounded beautiful. Because they had been lived before they were spoken. Actions had already begun writing the story long before words were ready to tell it. Still, one question echoed inside their heart. Would you see the difference? Not the difference in appearance. Not the difference in confidence. But the difference in character. Because true transformation is rarely loud. It reveals itself in patience instead of pressure. In listening instead of arguing. In consistency instead of empty promises. As the distance between the past and the present grew smaller, they realized something that brought unexpected peace. Love cannot force another heart to open. It can only arrive with sincerity and wait with respect. That understanding removed the final traces of desperation. Now they were no longer chasing an outcome. They were honoring the truth. If reconciliation became possible, they would treasure it. If healing required more time, they would patiently wait. If trust needed to be rebuilt slowly, they would accept every step without complaint. Because love that has matured no longer demands immediate rewards. It simply chooses faithfulness. As the sun began to set, casting warm light across the horizon, they found themselves standing closer than ever to the moment they had imagined through countless sleepless nights. Their heart raced. Not from panic. From gratitude. Gratitude that life had offered one more opportunity to do what should have been done long ago. One more opportunity to replace silence with honesty. Pride with humility. Distance with presence. They quietly whispered the words that had lived inside them for so long. I regret everything I said. I regret everything I did. I cannot undo yesterday. But if you allow me, I will spend every tomorrow showing you how deeply I have changed. With those words resting gently upon their heart, they took one final step forward. Because sometimes the greatest journeys are not measured by miles traveled. They are measured by the courage it takes to return, with nothing to hide and everything to give. And just beyond that next step awaited the moment that could change two lives forever. My beloved child. There are moments that divide a life into two chapters, the chapter before courage, and the chapter after it. This was one of those moments. As they stood there, only a few steps away from the conversation they had imagined 1,000 times, they realized something unexpected. Their heartbeat was no longer racing because they feared rejection. It was racing because, for the first time in a very long while, they had nothing left to hide. Every mask had fallen away. Every excuse had been surrendered. Every wall that once seemed impossible to tear down now lay behind them like forgotten ruins. They whispered quietly to themselves. No more pretending. The wind carried those words away, but their heart held on to them. They thought about the person they used to be. Someone who believed vulnerability was dangerous. Someone who confused silence with strength and distance with protection. Looking back, they hardly recognized that version of themselves anymore. Pain had become their teacher. Loss had become their guide. And real love had become their greatest lesson. They remembered the first time you made them laugh without even trying. They remembered conversations that lasted late into the night, when dreams felt close enough to touch and tomorrow seemed full of endless possibilities. They remembered how safe your presence once felt, even when life around you was uncertain. Those memories were no longer painful reminders of what they had lost. They had become reminders of what was still worth fighting for. Not because the past could be recreated, but because the future could still be written differently. For so long they believed love was something that simply happened. Now they understood that love is also something we choose. We choose patience when frustration is easier. We choose honesty when hiding feels safer. We choose forgiveness when resentment seems justified. Most importantly, we choose to stay present even when life becomes difficult. That realization changed the way they saw everything. As they moved forward, another thought entered their heart. What if this isn't only about asking for another chance? What if this is about becoming the kind of person who deserves one? The question settled deeply within them. They understood that true love is never proven by dramatic speeches alone. It is revealed in quiet consistency. Showing up. Keeping promises. Listening carefully. Speaking gently. Choosing understanding over assumption. Every single day. That is the love they wanted to offer now. Not perfect love. Faithful love. The kind of love that remains steady even when emotions rise and fall. As they drew closer, they imagined what they hoped you might one day see. Not someone returning because life became lonely. Not someone returning because every other path failed. but someone returning because they finally understood the value of what they once held in their hands. Someone who had allowed regret to become wisdom instead of bitterness. Someone who had allowed brokenness to become compassion instead of anger. Someone who had learned that the strongest hearts are not those that never break, they are the ones willing to heal honestly. The sun slowly dipped lower across the horizon, painting the sky with warm colors that seemed to whisper of fresh beginnings. In that quiet beauty, another realization filled their heart. No matter what happened next, they would never again leave important words unspoken. Life is too precious. Time is too uncertain. Love is too valuable. If gratitude needs to be expressed, express it. If forgiveness needs to be offered, offer it. If someone's presence matters, tell them before tomorrow becomes another missed opportunity. Those lessons had become part of who they were. At last, they lifted their eyes with a quiet peace they had never known before. The future was still unwritten. The outcome was still unknown. Yet hope had replaced fear. Because courage does not guarantee the ending we desire. It simply guarantees that we no longer allow fear to decide the ending for us. With a calm breath, they whispered the words they had carried for so long. I came back because my heart never truly left. I came back because I finally understand the love I almost lost. I came back because I don't want my story to end with silence. I don't expect perfection. I only hope we can begin again with honesty, patience, and hearts that have both learned from yesterday. Those words were not the end of their journey. They were the beginning of a new one. A journey where trust would be rebuilt one conversation at a time. Where kindness would replace old misunderstandings. Where healing would happen through small, faithful moments rather than grand promises. Because lasting love is rarely built in one extraordinary day. It is built through thousands of ordinary days where two hearts continue choosing each other again and again. And perhaps that is the quiet miracle hidden inside every second chance. Not that the past disappears, but that two people become wiser because of it. Not that every scar vanishes, but that every scar becomes a reminder of how far love has brought them. So if this story has touched your heart tonight, carry this simple truth with you. The greatest victories are not won by never making mistakes. They are won by having the courage to learn, to grow, to seek forgiveness, and to become someone whose actions speak louder than yesterday's regrets. Every sunrise is an invitation to choose love over pride. Every new day is another opportunity to become the person your heart was always capable of being. And sometimes, the most beautiful words anyone can ever say are not simply, "I'm sorry." They are, "I've changed. And I'll spend every day proving it." My beloved child. The story did not end with those words. In many ways, it was only just beginning. Because promises, no matter how sincere, must eventually become visible through everyday actions. Anyone can speak beautifully for a few minutes. Anyone can make heartfelt declarations when emotions are overflowing. But lasting love is measured differently. It is measured by consistency. By choosing kindness when no one is watching. By keeping small promises before making big ones. By remaining present even when life becomes complicated again. The person standing before you understood this now. They knew they could not ask you to forget everything overnight. Trust does not return because a clock strikes midnight. Healing does not happen because one conversation goes well. It grows quietly, one honest moment at a time. So instead of asking for immediate answers, they simply offered something they had never truly offered before. Patience. If your heart needs time, they quietly thought, then I will respect that time. If you need space to believe my actions instead of my words, I understand. If rebuilding takes weeks, months, or longer, I will not rush what deserves to be built carefully. That was the greatest evidence of how much they had changed. The old version of them wanted quick solutions. The new version understood that meaningful things grow slowly. Like a tree whose roots deepen long before its branches reach the sky. Like dawn, which never rushes the sunrise. Like love, which becomes strongest not during easy seasons, but after weathering difficult ones together. As these thoughts settled into their heart, another realization quietly emerged. They were no longer trying to become the person they thought you wanted. They were becoming the person they themselves could finally respect. That difference changed everything. Growth that depends on someone else's approval rarely lasts. Growth rooted in honesty becomes part of who we are. And because of that, every day brought another opportunity to live differently. They became slower to judge. Quicker to apologize. More willing to listen than to defend themselves. More interested in understanding than in winning. Without even noticing, the people around them began seeing the change as well. Not because they announced it, but because genuine transformation always reveals itself through ordinary moments. One evening, while watching the sunset paint the horizon in warm shades of gold and crimson, they smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. Not because every problem had disappeared. Not because every question had already been answered. But because hope had returned. Hope that healing is possible. Hope that broken chapters do not have to become the final chapter. Hope that even hearts carrying old scars can learn to beat with joy again. They looked toward the future with quiet confidence. Whatever tomorrow held, they would meet it honestly. If another conversation came, they would speak with kindness. If another misunderstanding appeared, they would choose patience. If another difficult season arrived, they would remember everything life had already taught them. Because love is not proven once. It is proven again and again, through countless ordinary decisions. And perhaps that is the hidden beauty of this journey. The destination mattered. But the person they became along the way mattered even more. For in learning how to love someone else well, they had finally learned how to live with humility, gratitude, and courage. So they carried one final promise deep within their heart, not as a dramatic declaration, but as a quiet commitment they intended to honor every day. I cannot rewrite our yesterday. But I can write a better tomorrow. I cannot erase the tears we once cried. But I can choose to bring more peace than pain from this day forward. I cannot demand another chance. But I can become someone who treats every chance as a priceless gift. And with that gentle resolve, they stepped into the next chapter, not chasing perfection, but embracing growth. Because the strongest relationships are not built by two perfect people. They are built by two imperfect people who keep choosing grace, honesty, and hope, one day at a time. May this fictional story remind you that sincere change begins with humility, lasting trust is earned through consistent actions, and every new day offers another opportunity to choose compassion over pride. Sometimes, the most meaningful return is not simply coming back to someone, it is returning as a better version of yourself. My beloved child. As the days gently unfolded, something beautiful began to happen, something neither heart could have forced, planned, or hurried. The silence between them no longer felt cold. It became peaceful. There was no pressure to erase every painful memory in a single conversation. No expectation that every wound would disappear overnight. Instead, there was something far more precious. There was willingness. A willingness to listen before speaking. A willingness to understand before assuming. A willingness to rebuild instead of replace. And sometimes, that willingness is where healing truly begins. The person who once walked away now understood that every moment together was a gift, not a guarantee. They stopped taking ordinary things for granted. A simple conversation became meaningful. A shared laugh became unforgettable. Even quiet moments, where neither of you needed to fill the silence with words, became reminders that genuine connection doesn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes love simply says, "I'm here. I'm listening. I'm not leaving." For the first time, they noticed how much beauty exists in the little things they had once overlooked. Morning greetings. Unexpected encouragement. Checking in after a difficult day. Remembering small details that most people forget. Holding space for each other's dreams instead of competing with them. These quiet acts became the foundation of something stronger than excitement. They became the foundation of trust. And trust, once rebuilt, carries a different kind of strength. It is no longer based on assumptions. It is built on experience. On seeing someone's actions match their words. On watching promises become habits. On realizing that real love grows through consistency far more than intensity. One afternoon, while reflecting on everything that had changed, they smiled softly. Not because life had become perfect. Life never becomes perfect. There were still challenges. Still moments of uncertainty. Still days when old fears tried to whisper familiar lies. But now, those fears no longer controlled them. Whenever doubt appeared, they remembered how much had already been overcome. Whenever insecurity returned, they chose honest conversation instead of silence. Whenever misunderstanding threatened to grow, they reached for compassion before judgment. That became their new rhythm. And slowly, very slowly, peace replaced anxiety. Hope replaced hesitation. Confidence replaced fear. Then one evening, while watching the sky slowly fill with stars, they quietly admitted something they had never fully understood before. The greatest blessing wasn't finding someone to love. The greatest blessing was learning how to love well. That realization filled their heart with gratitude. Because love is not measured by dramatic beginnings. It is measured by faithful endings. It is measured by two people who continue choosing respect even after disappointment. Choosing patience after frustration. Choosing kindness after misunderstanding. Choosing each other after learning how fragile hearts can truly be. As they looked ahead, they no longer dreamed only about happy moments. They dreamed about building a peaceful life. A life where both hearts felt safe enough to be honest. Safe enough to admit mistakes. Safe enough to celebrate victories together. Safe enough to grow without fear of being abandoned whenever life became difficult. That kind of love cannot be purchased. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be manufactured. It is cultivated. Day by day. Choice by choice. Moment by moment. Looking back, they realized that if none of the painful chapters had ever happened, they might never have discovered the depth of gratitude they now carried. Sometimes life's greatest lessons arrive disguised as heartbreak. Not because heartbreak is the goal, but because healing often reveals strengths we never knew existed. Now, when they thought of the future, they no longer imagined dramatic declarations or impossible promises. They imagined ordinary mornings filled with peace. Conversations filled with honesty. A friendship that remained strong even during difficult seasons. A love that became quieter, but infinitely deeper. Because mature love is rarely loud. It is dependable. It shows up. It keeps its word. It stays gentle even when life becomes complicated. And that, perhaps, is the greatest transformation of all. Not simply returning, but remaining. Remaining faithful. Remaining patient. Remaining grateful. Remaining willing to grow together through every new chapter that life unfolds. So if this fictional journey has spoken to your heart, let it leave you with this lasting reminder. The strongest relationships are not built by avoiding mistakes. They are built by facing those mistakes with honesty, learning from them with humility, and choosing every day to become a source of peace rather than pain. And sometimes, the most meaningful homecoming is not the moment someone returns. It is the moment two hearts discover they have both become wiser, kinder, and more capable of loving than they ever believed possible. My beloved child. Every journey of the heart eventually arrives at a quiet place where the past no longer has the final word. This is that place. The days that followed were not filled with endless drama or impossible miracles. Instead, they were filled with something far more valuable: small moments of faithfulness. One conversation became another. One smile slowly replaced another tear. One act of kindness gently covered an old wound. The trust that had once been broken did not suddenly return overnight, but little by little, it began to grow again. Like the first rays of morning light after a long night, hope returned so gradually that neither of them noticed it at first. Then one day, they looked at each other and realized something extraordinary. They were no longer trying to relive the past. They were creating a better future. The mistakes that once separated them had become lessons they would never forget. The silence that once hurt them had taught them the value of honest conversations. The distance that once seemed unbearable had shown them how precious true companionship really is. At last, the words that had lived inside one heart for so long were finally spoken with complete sincerity. I regret everything I said. I regret everything I did. But more than anything, I'm grateful that life gave me the chance to become someone better. I cannot promise that we'll never face difficult days again. But I can promise that I will never stop choosing honesty over pride, patience over anger, and love over fear. Those words were not spoken to impress anyone. They were spoken because they had become true. And in that moment, forgiveness quietly found its way into the story. Not because every scar disappeared, but because both hearts understood that healing is stronger than bitterness. They chose to stop measuring each other by yesterday's failures. Instead, they began recognizing each other by today's faithfulness. That is where real love begins. Not in perfection. Not in fantasy. But in two hearts that have learned how to grow together. As the seasons continued to change, they discovered that happiness is rarely found in extraordinary events. It lives inside ordinary mornings. Shared laughter. Quiet prayers. Long walks. Simple conversations. Holding each other's hand during uncertain moments. Celebrating victories together. Facing challenges together. Choosing each other. Again and again. And again. They finally understood that love is not something we find once. Love is something we keep choosing every single day. My beloved child, perhaps the greatest message hidden inside this fictional story is this. Every ending can become the beginning of something wiser. Every mistake can become a lesson. Every season of waiting can prepare the heart for greater compassion. And every sincere act of humility has the power to transform tomorrow. Never lose hope in the possibility of growth. Never underestimate the strength of forgiveness. Never forget that kindness has the ability to heal wounds that anger never could. Walk forward with courage. Speak with honesty. Love with patience. And treasure the people who bring light into your life. May your heart always find peace when life feels uncertain. May wisdom guide your choices. May hope remain stronger than fear. May you always have the courage to forgive, the humility to grow, and the strength to become the kind of person whose love brings comfort, joy, and lasting peace to everyone around you. May your days be filled with purpose, your nights with rest, and your future with countless new beginnings. Thank you for staying until the very end of this story. If this message encouraged your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more uplifting fictional inspirational stories, and share it with someone who may need a reminder that hope, healing, and love are always worth believing in. Until next time, may peace surround you, may hope remain in your heart, and may every new sunrise remind you that beautiful new chapters are always possible.